Before the world knew war, Europe believed it was living in peace.
Factories were rising, cities were growing, and nations felt powerful.
But behind this progress, dangerous rivalries were forming.
Empires wanted more power, and none were willing to step back.
Across Europe, ordinary people sensed that peace was slipping away. Among the crowd, one man carried a decision that would change history.
The first shots were fired, echoing through the square, shaking the hearts of all who witnessed it.
Chaos erupted as the soldiers returned fire, and the city became a battlefield in an instant. The relentless bombardment forced every soldier to move with caution, aware that danger lurked in every corner. Every step taken was a gamble, each moment a test of courage amidst chaos and destruction. The battlefield was unforgiving, every sound a warning, every shadow a threat. Bullets tore through the air, chaos and fear consuming every soldier. The roar of the cannon shook the ground, signaling the relentless advance of battle. Brave soldiers pressed forward through the chaos, driven by duty and fear alike.
Every shot carried the weight of survival, every movement a fight against fate.
The battlefield erupted with chaos, yet courage surged through every soldier. Under relentless fire, they clung to every moment. Every heartbeat counted. As dawn broke, fear was replaced by orders, and men ran into history. In the trenches, courage was measured in seconds. Between the trenches lay a land where survival was almost impossible. Soldiers waited in silence, knowing the next whistle could mean death. The order was coming, and there would be no turning back. With one whistle, millions of lives were pushed into the fire. The battlefield answered with thunder and fire. Machine guns turned the trenches into corridors of terror. Artillery fire ruled the battlefield, striking without warning. Inside the trenches, survival depended on every second.
They moved carefully through the chaos, knowing danger lurked at every corner.
Amidst the deafening blasts, soldiers relied on each other to survive. Every inch gained was paid for with fear and courage alike. Bravery was tested in every step across the deadly open field. Every order was a matter of life and death. They moved forward, knowing every step could be their last. The earth itself began to shake as artillery changed the meaning of war. Men realized the trenches were no longer safe. The world was stepping into a war it could never escape. Once the first shots were fired, there was no turning back. Europe was now burning, one battlefield at a time. What was meant to be a short war was turning into a nightmare. The line between survival and death was thinner than ever. Every second felt like an eternity as the artillery rained down. The soldiers knew every move could be their last, yet they pressed on. As the first shells fell, the men braced themselves, ready for the chaos ahead. From the trenches, they watched the enemy approach, hearts pounding with every explosion. They pushed forward through the chaos, every step a fight against fear and the storm around them. From the safety of the trenches, they watched the battle rage, hearts pounding with every explosion. Braving the hail of bullets and shells, they pressed forward, knowing the fate of the battle rested on their courage. In a single moment, the ground shook violently.
reminding everyone how thin the line is between life and death in war. When the smoke began to fade, humanity appeared in the middle of destruction. War does not choose soldiers only, it crushes innocent lives first. As days passed, fear was no longer hidden. It lived in every shaking hand. When the sun rose, it revealed not hope, but the cost of war. Every step forward meant risking everything they had left. By morning, the battlefield had turned into a graveyard of shattered hopes. Exhausted soldiers realized the battle had taken more than it could ever give back. As dawn arrived, the battlefield stood silent, bearing witness to unimaginable destruction. Among the ruins, soldiers fought not just the enemy, but their own survival. With every step forward, the battlefield turned into a graveyard of courage and fear. In the chaos of war, survival became the only mission left. The battlefield was relentless, every second a fight for life. Every soldier braced for the next shell, knowing the danger was unrelenting. The soldiers huddled behind the sandbags, their eyes scanning the horizon for the next wave of attacks, hearts racing with anticipation. The artillery shells tore through the distance, sending smoke and debris into the air as commanders shouted orders over the chaos. Soldiers crawled through the muddy trenches, dodging bullets and explosions, their faces etched with determination and fear. From the trenches, soldiers fired relentlessly, each shot echoing across the battlefield as distant explosions shook the earth beneath them. After the gunfire faded, the battlefield revealed its true cost. Wounded soldiers struggled to survive among the ruins. For those who survived the bullets, pain became their new companion. Every step forward was a battle of its own. Survival demanded strength beyond the body.
Not every battle was fought with weapons. Some were fought to save a life. When the guns fell silent, the weight of survival finally settled in. Morning came, but the fear never left. Even in silence, the war demanded preparation. Eyes searched the horizon, knowing danger could return at any moment. Silence ruled the trenches as soldiers waited for orders. Every quiet moment felt heavier than the last. Men worked quietly, fixing the trenches that barely protected them. Every repair felt temporary in a war that never paused. Inside the trenches, silence spoke louder than words. Every face carried fear, exhaustion, and unspoken thoughts of home. Every dawn brought uncertainty. A single glance over the trench could mean life or death. Hours passed in silence. Men waited, not knowing if the next moment would be their last. Night brought no peace. Darkness only sharpened fear and loneliness. Morning revealed who survived the night and who would never rise again. War was not constant fighting. It was endless waiting. Hours passed in silence. Every second felt heavier than the last. Night brought no rest, only sharper fear. Morning arrived without hope. The war was still there. Orders were given without emotion. Lives were counted without names. Food arrived like a small victory. Hunger never truly left. Wounds were treated quickly. There was never enough time. Letters carried hope home. Many were never answered. Silence became a warning. Something was always coming. Every sound raised fear. Every shadow felt alive.
Between battles, silence ruled the trenches. Men waited, trapped with their thoughts. Night brought no peace to the trenches. Darkness only sharpened the fear. Shells did not need to hit to kill. Fear crushed men long before wounds did. Morning came without mercy. Survival was the only victory left.
Orders traveled through fragile wires. Lives depended on every word received.
Guard duty never ended. Even rest felt dangerous. Food arrived in silence. Even small comforts were shared carefully. Letters carried hope across the war. Words became a lifeline to home. Help came wherever it could. Survival depended on steady hands. Every evacuation was a race against time. Delay often meant death. Rest came in brief moments. Even stillness carried exhaustion. In quiet moments, memories returned. War never erased the past. Silence followed the long night. Another day of survival began. Eyes stayed fixed on the horizon. Danger could return at any moment. Preparation never stopped. Routine was a shield against fear. Night did not bring rest. It brought responsibility. One mistake could cost an entire trench. Morning came without hope. Only another day to endure. Another day closer to the end, or to death. Even in exhaustion, discipline remained. Inspection was not routine. It was survival. Night did not bring rest, only silence, and the weight of another day survived. Morning came without hope. Names were called. Some voices answered. Many never would again. Officers walked the trenches. They looked for discipline. The soldiers stood still. Inside, fear never rested. Night brought no peace, only cold, only waiting. Darkness listened as men held their breath. Morning arrived without hope. Another day began in the trenches. The trenches were never silent. Even in calm moments, fear walked beside them. Every sunrise meant survival for one more day, but it also meant facing death again. Inside the trenches, silence spoke louder than gunfire. Every man waited, unsure if this day would be his last. Dawn brought no comfort, only another test of endurance. Every sunrise meant surviving one more day of war. Inside the trenches, time lost its meaning. Hours felt endless, and hope faded with every silent minute. Standing guard meant staring into nothingness, yet danger could appear at any second without warning. Inside the trenches, silence spoke louder than words. Every man waited, unsure if this night would be his last. Nights were the most dangerous. In the darkness, fear imagined enemies where none could be seen. Between attacks, men waited in silence. Time slowed, and every minute felt endless. Dawn arrived without hope. Another day began in a war that never slept. Inside the trenches, time lost its meaning. Hours passed, but nothing ever changed. Night watches were the longest. Fear grew louder when the world went quiet. Morning brought no relief. It only reminded them they were still alive. Food was scarce and tasteless, but it kept them alive another day. They did not build for comfort. They built to survive. In silence, wounds were treated. Not all scars could be seen. Dawn did not bring peace. It only revealed who was still alive. Between attacks, men prepared in silence. Every movement carried the weight of survival. Rain soaked everything. There was no shelter from the war. Orders moved faster than men. Messages decided who lived and who advanced. Looking up meant risking everything. Even a second could invite death. Night offered no rest, only longer hours of fear. For a moment, the darkness lifted. Then fear returned with the night. Morning came slowly. Men measured time by survival. Food was scarce. Hunger became part of the routine. Letters carried hope beyond the trenches. Words traveled where men could not. Sometimes survival depended on listening. The ground itself warned of danger. Relief came without celebration. Another group simply took their place. Discipline held the line. Fear was never mentioned. Between battles, there was no peace, only exhaustion, only waiting. Night brought no safety, only sharper fear, and eyes that never truly closed. Morning came slowly, not with hope, but with exhaustion that never ended. Every dawn brought the same question. Would this be another day survived, or the last one remembered? Inside the trenches, there was no space for comfort, only mud beneath their boots and fear pressed tightly on every wall. Night was the most dangerous enemy. In the darkness, every sound felt like death approaching. Morning did not bring relief. It only reminded them they had survived another night. They stared into the fog, knowing the silence would not last. What waited ahead was unknown, but fear was certain. Inside the trench, every step felt heavier than the last. The earth closed in, and fear had nowhere to escape. Night offered no rest, only new fears. In the darkness, every shadow felt like an enemy. Morning arrived without hope or relief. Another day began, exactly like the last. Messages traveled slower than bullets, and one mistake could cost hundreds of lives. Between battles, silence filled the trenches, but fear never slept. Before sunrise, every shadow felt like an enemy. One mistake could mean death. Morning came without hope or relief. The war waited with them. Even when nothing moved, danger never slept. Every shadow could mean death. At night, the earth itself seemed to whisper. Every sound could signal the enemy drawing closer. When the light disappeared, the fear remained. The silence felt heavier than the sound of gunfire. No one spoke. Every movement felt dangerous. Fear did not announce itself. It lived quietly in every breath they took. They waited without knowing what would come next. In war, waiting was its own kind of punishment. Fatigue spread through the trench like a silent enemy. Each man carried the weight of fear, exhaustion, and time. As dawn approached, silence replaced the chaos of night. The men knew the next order could come at any moment. There were no speeches, no cheers, only the sound of breath and the weight of what lay ahead. As dawn broke, they rose from the trenches, knowing that once they climbed out, there was no turning back. Each step forward felt heavier than the last, as the land itself seemed to resist their survival. They did not know if the next second would be their last. Fear became a constant companion, walking beside them in silence. Even when they stopped moving, the war did not stop. It followed them into the trenches, into every breath they took. Hands shook not from cold alone, but from the knowledge that the next explosion could be the last thing they ever heard. Every second inside the trench felt stolen from death. Men learned to breathe quietly, as if sound itself could invite the shells. Weapons shook in their hands, not from weakness, but from knowing how close death truly was. Then the ground itself began to scream. Every explosion reminded them the trench was not protection. It was a grave waiting to collapse. In moments like this, bravery disappeared. Only fear remained, raw, silent, and impossible to escape. The trenches offered no safety, only the illusion of survival. Every hour blurred into the next. Time lost all meaning underground. The trenches were never still. Even the ground tried to bury them alive. Water filled the trenches faster than hope. Survival became a fight against the earth itself. Morning came, but relief did not. Those who survived stood among the cost of the night. No one spoke. Words had died long before the men bed. Every distant explosion reminded them that survival was temporary. Death was only waiting for its turn. Hours felt like days in the trenches. Every breath was taken with the fear that it might be the last. In the quiet moments, memories became weapons. Thoughts of home hurt more than the enemy's fire. In the trenches, survival depended on the man beside you. Brotherhood was the last defense against despair. Morning did not bring peace. It only brought the waiting again. Men prepared in silence. Every movement felt heavy, like the war itself. Time moved slowly. Every second felt closer to something terrible. Eyes searched the horizon. Death often arrived before it was seen. The silence broke without warning. The war reminded them it was still alive. Men struggled to breathe. The trench swallowed the blast and kept them alive. They survived the first udar. They knew more would follow. Messages moved faster than men. Orders traveled through fear and mud. The trench itself became a weapon. Every blast tried to bury them alive. Help came in seconds, or not at all. Survival depended on who reached you first. Night brought no peace. It only slowed the fear. Morning always returned. So did the war. Eyes watched the horizon, waiting for the next order. The warning came too late. Instinct became their only shield. The earth itself turned against them. Survival became a matter of seconds. In the chaos that followed, courage took many forms. Sometimes, it was simply refusing to leave another man behind. As the bombardment continued, fear became constant. Every second felt borrowed, every breath a gamble. Morning arrived without mercy. Those who survived the night now faced another day of uncertainty and loss. There was no speech, no encouragement, only the quiet understanding that the next order could change everything. As dawn approached, fear and duty stood side by side, waiting for the moment the silence would finally break. The silence did not fade gently. It shattered, ripped apart by the first thunder of war. In the seconds after the blast, men searched for life among the living. There was no pause for grief, only seconds to decide who might live and who would be left behind. Dawn did not bring hope. It only revealed who had survived the night and who had not. The silence never lasted. War always returned, without warning. When the shells began to fall, there was no bravery, only survival. The trench became a grave in seconds. Men dug not for victory, but to pull the living from the dead. The trench became a grave in seconds. Men dug not for victory, but to pull the living from the dead. Help arrived too late for many. In war, even rescue had a deadline. Saving one life meant risking another. In the trenches, every second was borrowed from death. The shells did not choose targets. They punished everyone equally. After the blast, silence felt heavier than the noise. Men counted breaths, wondering who would still be alive next. Orders still came, even when hope did not. The war demanded movement, even from the broken. Dawn did not bring peace. It only revealed what the night had spared.
Men waited without speaking. Every breath felt louder than a gunshot.
Hands shook before the battle began. Fear arrived long before the bullets.
Morning did not bring hope. It only revealed how close death had come. Men waited in silence. Every second felt heavier than the last. Then the ground began to shake. War was about to speak again. The shells fell without warning. There was no time to run. Men disappeared in seconds. Survival became instinct. Smoke filled every breath. Even helping the wounded felt like a battle. Hands shook as rifles were raised. Fear was no longer hidden.
The machine guns found their rhythm. The trench became a cage.
When the firing stopped, no one celebrated. They only counted who was left. Silence revealed the cost. Not everyone stood back up. Even after battle, the work continued. Survival depended on every careful step. Pain was treated in whispers. Every life mattered, even here. Darkness brought a fragile calm. No one knew how long it would last. Even in calm, vigilance never slept. The night watched back.
Silence did not bring peace. It only gave time to remember fear.
Every breath felt borrowed. Every second waited for the sound of guns. Then the earth spoke, and the war finally answered. When the shells began to fall, fear had no language. Only survival remained. When the explosions stopped, silence revealed what violence had left behind. For those who survived, the battle did not end when the guns fell silent. As dawn arrived, the survivors rose again, carrying the weight of a war that refused to let them rest. In silence, they prepared once more, knowing that every moment of calm was only temporary. Each man waited in his own thoughts, carrying fear, hope, and memories from another life. Minutes stretched into hours, and every sound felt like the beginning of the end. The trenches were no longer just defenses. They became prisons of mud, fear, and endless waiting. When the shells fell, there was nowhere to run. The earth itself tried to bury them alive. The trenches were never safe. Even when the guns stopped, the mud and walls continued the killing. Moving forward was a battle of its own. Every step demanded strength most soldiers no longer had. There were moments when the body simply refused to move, not from wounds, but from exhaustion. The fighting did not always come with noise. Sometimes, war was just endless movement through mud, with fear walking beside every step. Some survived with their bodies intact, but their eyes showed everything they had lost. The dead were buried where they fell, their names remembered only by the earth. War did not only destroy armies, it erased homes, families, and futures. Those who returned were never truly whole. The war followed them home. Years passed, but the memories remained, etched deeper than any scar. The land healed slowly, but the cost of war could never be undone. This was not a story of glory. It was a warning written in blood. War does not end when the fighting stops. It lives on as a warning to humanity.